Where are you? I can't see you.
Facts will fail you.
Peace, everyone. We are live, so welcome to the space. Um, Let us know if you can hear the music and let it play for a little while.
Of the creeping vine, they lie. Oh, how they
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Greetings to you, Yah, the New Life Global Ministries, Marjorie Marie, Ima Sequoia. Peace, and welcome.
to the lights in the sky. Who am I? I am knowledge. 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 It's the quality or state of being wise. Knowledge of what is true or right, coupled with just judgment as to action, sagacity, discernment or insight. Who am I?
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Peace and greetings. We will that you all are, well, not everyone. Some people don't want to be safe, but safe, great. You feeling good? This is another Sabbath. We're closing off for a strong, but opening something beautiful, something sacred. So we're always happy to share it with you all, and give you all an opportunity to acknowledge Sabbath as well too. All right, I'm Sister Maria, of course.
And I'm Safta Ahava.
So, all right, so this evening we are jumping right into wardrobe. The good thing is, listen, we've been talking about the earthly wardrobe for a while, but we're switching it up just a little bit because what we want to do is get into the next layer, right? So we've spoken about the first layer. We had that conversation about the wardrobe, what it is, what it does, and the fact that it's a layer, right? And it is a form of separation. It's a form of showing our culture. It's a form of being obedient. It's a form of identifying who we are. But in addition to that, we want to welcome you to the other layer of the wardrobe, the divine wardrobe, our divine wardrobe. And so, what we want you to do is to pause for a cause and just share this build with your circle right now. If you know someone who could, probably possibly jump on, or they'll enjoy the build, listening to it and shifting into a relaxing mode on Friday evening. We say Yom Shishi, share it in your circle right now. Whatever platform, hit the share button right now. And we'll wait for you. All right. The major questions we want to think about is, are you wise to your own birthright? Right? Today's wisdom, right? Knowledge, all being born to wisdom. So, are you wise to your own birthright? Are you sure of the attire that you don every day? The spiritual attire, right? Not just the outfits, the spiritual attire. All right. So those are two major questions. And as a woman, I am called to be one who wears strength and honor. Those are the two things I'm called to wear. And not just wear it because it's on me, wear it because it's in me. See, I switched it up so I could own that one, right? Can I say? Can I own that one? um, are you though? We are called. We are definitely called to wear strength and honor. Are you? Are you also called to wear strength and honor? And do you wear strength and honor every day? All right. So our focus this evening is Ephesians, and Safta Hava will take us away with that, and then we'll jump in.
Shabbat shalom. And just taking a step back for a moment and being grateful and thankful to the Most High Yah. Just to have to be, it's a privilege to be a part of a community that serves and acknowledges the laws and the precepts that pretty much, you know, saves our lives, I would say. And we just give thanks to Chief Yuya, our Chief Jetna, for providing this space and for pouring in as often and as much as he does. Um, it's really life giving. So this is also something that will is a protection is what we're going to talk about this evening. So starting with Ephesians 6:10, the armor of God. It's a metaphor in the Bible, but the full armor of God comprises of the following 6 items. So the scripture says, "Finally, my brother, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you might be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle with flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. Having done so all having done all to stand, therefore, having your loins girded with the truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shroud with preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So this is a layer of the clothing that really radiates from within out. So we're going to just get into it and break down what these things mean. And especially when we talk about, who we stand against and the wiles of the devil. And Akoti Maria is going to talk a little bit about, who was being spoken to and why these things were being said and to whom and by whom.
All right. So let's pause for a little bit and greet everyone, because I'm sure you all in the chat, you're like, wait, they're just, you know, driving the train and not even pausing to see who's on the train. So let's check in with our, you know, let's check in with all passengers on the train tonight. So we greet everyone. Chief Yuya, greetings, and we give thanks to our Elohim for your presence always, right? Your guidance, your leadership. No suggestions come from you, only instructions. So we give thanks for that. We give thanks for that. Can't say we have nothing. We have a lot. So we thank you for being in the space, and no matter what you do and all of what you do, you're still always here to support and to be present. So we give thanks. Margie Marie Art coming through second place. All right, we see you, Miss Margie Marie. On the beach. She's like, I'm right here. Very good. Ima Sequoia, big up yourself. Master Menelek, big up yourself. Darian Lampley, big up yourself. Sister Yafe, Alpha Woman Now with Yakira Eden, Imanaya, Abba Herut. All right, looking shiny. Back at you. Thank you very much. Chief Yuya, you again. Give thanks for giving us that knowledge, all being born to wisdom. That's why we are here to get wiser today. Indeed, we're here to share some wisdom with you all. And sisters, hey, get ready. Aki Lo the scholar, give thanks, or resident historian, boop boop. Chi Yuya shares Proverbs 9:10. The Yerat Hashem is the beginning of Chokmah, and the Da'as Kedoshem, knowledge of the Holy One, is Bina. I see. I see. I think. What am I missing? And the Da'as Kedoshem. Chokmah is what is Chokmah again? Oh my gosh. I used to know. I feel bad. I feel bad. But thank you. We'll come back. We'll come back to that. Proverbs 9:10. We're gonna pull that up. Um Los Almighty, give thanks for the space. Greetings. All right. So I think someone else is joining us. Let me see what's happening. I just want to make sure. All right. So, yeah, we'll come back to the chat, right? So today we're exploring this divine wardrobe from the perspective of what was given in Ephesians. But before we start talking about it and building on it, it's always important for us to consider, you know, who is speaking. All right. Oh my goodness. We have some interesting stuff going on backstage. So just give me 1 second because this person is back again, sharing their love in all sorts of forms. But love is a connection. So if we can't connect culturally, we're gonna have to, yeah, give you the boot. Sorry. Thank you. Bye. Ephesians. So the most important thing one of the most important things that we've been taught about about studying scripture, studying any sacred text for that matter, is always considering the context, right? Because I think context is huge. Who is speaking? Who is being spoken to, right? And what is happening at the time, all right? So in the book of Ephesians, we have a letter from the Apostle Paul going to the church of Ephesus, the people of Ephesus. And this is Ephesus is modern day Turkey, right? And of late, I've been doing that a little bit, like looking at some of the places, the locations, and like identifying where they are now. I just find it interesting, right? Geography and location and trying to figure out who lives there now, and who was the message to, and if the message had to be shared, would it be shared to these people, or is he speaking to a different group of people, right? So we know that the author is Paul. Paul is an apostle. We all know him very intimately, actually, in Anu, due to our study sessions. And his audience, again, the people of Ephesus. Some people say that they were referred to as saints, and an elite group, almost an elite group of those who were followers of the way. And again, I think the context is important because we're talking about an ancient city, right? And this ancient city, the city itself was known for temples, right? Various temples actually connected to one of the wonders of the world. So I think it's important to think about what was happening at the time in terms of who were they worshiping, who were the other groups of people who were there, what were their cultural practices, spiritual practices, religious practices. That's important because what we see is Paul speaking to people and pouring instruction into them, saying to them, no, you have to arm yourself in this way because you're functioning among people who have a very different culture and they actually paid homage to a different deity. So you have to arm yourself. And so all we're going to do tonight is look at all of the components of the divine wardrobe, or what's considered the breastplate, not the breastplate, but the armor of the Elohim. And we're doing that because we're connecting it to our earthly wardrobe. What we did in the earthly wardrobe is explain to you what Hebrew people wore. How did they adorn themselves? How did the women adorn themselves? What were the things that they wore that would distinguish them from other cultures? Well, how do we protect ourselves spiritually, right? How do we arm ourselves and separate ourselves from the rest of the world, culturally and spiritually? Well, we use these several things, which are referred to the armor of the Most High. And Safta will jump in and start that first one. I, I, I wanted to just, let's just say, go to the chat really quickly. Sorry, Safta. Chief was actually giving the explanation, it seems, or the breakdown for what he shared earlier, Proverbs 9:10, where he says, the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Thank you. Thank you. He says, don't worry, there's a delay that I placed on the channel, so we don't actually see any sort of inappropriate comments. Okay, thank you. Because, well, y'all not seeing it, but there's a whole lot of going on back here. And I don't want to prevent you all from getting in, so I can't ban them, because then I would require everybody to sign in. But we're good to go. Safta, take it away.
So I really appreciate how you talk about Paul and who he was talking to with the Ephesians, and there was some concerns about, first of all, being separate, because and being set apart, because we are servants of the Most High Yah, we are His chosen people, and as I look at the first part of Ephesians, when it talks about you have to put on the whole armor. You can't just wear a piece here and a piece there. You got to wear the whole armor. And he actually tells you how to put it on and what it's for. And that's where the spiritual part comes in at, because, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is something that has to radiate from the inside out. You can't just dress up and walk down the street and think you're protected because you got your hair covered and maybe you're wearing a dress, or you're looking a certain way. It's a lot more deep. It's a lot deeper than that, and that's something I've learned over the last few years being a part of ANEW. But that first part was saying having your loins girded up with truth. And one of the things that we talked about when we were looking into this bill is we were looking at how a Roman soldier, how he put on his garb, from head to toe. And I always thought, when I would look at those movies, it looked so uncomfortable. And I thought, boy, that stuff must be heavy, you know. But actually, when we started to study about the spiritual wardrobe, and I thought about how we wear it and how we put it on, that first one, it talks about having your loins girded about with truth. And that's one of the first things that hit me square in the face coming into a community is truth. Because, in all honesty, that is not something that I practiced, period. And it became such you know, a habitual liar, because the lifestyle I live and being out there, I was not committed uh, to telling anybody the truth. I told people what I wanted to tell them, regardless of what they could see. So when we started talking about having your loins girded about with truth, coming into ANEW, dealing with the 14 keys, that was the first thing I remember having to deal with is truth. And I'm going to jump back to the chat because Chief says any armor would feel heavy if you don't wear it daily. And that is so important because even spiritual armor is heavy. Truth was heavy for me because that is not something I knew how to walk in. That is not something yeah, it just wasn't a part of my life to be, just straight up honest. But, one of the things, and I'm just going to kind of follow my notes here. So if you see me reading, it's deep and I'm still learning to walk in truth daily. I have to catch myself and I have a covering that is always checking me just on little things I do that is might be, and it might seem little to me, but it causes big problems because truth is something you learn to practice. As she said, you have to wear it daily, you know. And so, in the notes I have here, that truth about the way it's never okay to betray the truth to avoid discomfort. And when you do that, you lose the trust of those around you. And most importantly, you lose faith in yourself. And that's so true because my identity was lost to me because of the lies that I lived. And they're lies you tell yourself first before you start telling other people. So, and the more we lie to ourselves and dive into imposter syndrome, the more anxious we become. And boy, you know, it's so good to be able to see and understand now, exactly what I was dealing with and that anxiousness. We inflict pain on ourselves and others. We have an unconscious disregard for our actions, and we forsake the opportunity to transmit light into a dark world. In this way, stealing is dishonesty. And I now understand why my relationships were never what I really wanted, or what I never accomplished building the relationships because of dishonesty. And so truth is big and it's amazing. It's not amazing, but I see why it's first. The first thing we put on is truth. You know, and it says, when you are disingenuous and you knock yourself out of alignment with your heart and the earth, sickness will follow. And that's so deep and it's so true, because you're not in line. Your heart ain't right. You can't be when you don't live it, and you don't walk in truth. And Master Menelik, he adds to it, he says, I'm sorry, this keeps jumping around here on me. It's Master Menelik shares. He says, I've actually had to wear a suit of armor before, and it was just for a day, but you definitely get used to it over time. And it's like before, not being girded about with truth, lying became such a habit that I forgot the lies I told, you know. And when I began to recognize that, what a liar I was, and that's not what I want to be. And again, when he says once you wear it for a day, you begin to get used to it. So now, whenever I'm speaking untruth, there's a light that goes off in my mind that even speaks to me inside that says, that ain't true. Why are you saying that? So this is that armor we're talking about putting on, and it does start from the inside out. And El Karar, he says facts on the armor. And Chief said, did you do any action in it, Master Menelik, or were you just modeling forth Dungeons and Dragons catalog? Did you walk a mile? Did you do your daily chores in it? Because that's when you start putting on this armor of God, not only is it heavy, but you do notice how you move. a lot. It's not, you're not free flowing like you did before. So, that putting on that truth was really something that I had to learn to deal with. And I started lying at such a young age, and I can't blame anybody, but the people I around who didn't tell the truth. I remember something that really impacted me is something my mother, when the first time I realized my mother told me a lie, how it made me feel. And it should have set a precedence on the people I cared about, how I wouldn't want to make them feel by not being honest. And it was something because she was uncomfortable with the truth. And that was, I remember, and matter of fact, Master Biddle, we were in a study group, and I think he said it, and I laughed because my mom had 5 girls, and I was the youngest, and I remember her telling me, and I think I was in the 4th grade, that if you kiss a boy, you get pregnant, you know? And the first time I kissed a boy, I think I was in the 6th or the 7th grade. And it was just one of them little playground pecks. But I was so nervous. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get pregnant. And I mean, I walked around in that for probably a week until I discussed it with my sister. And she laughed at me. But that really hurt my feelings because I thought, that's something so serious, as far as me being a female. Why would she tell me that? But because she didn't want me kissing no boys, instead of just, breaking down the truth. And it reminds me of the movie we just watched. Again, that Captain Fantastic, how he was so honest with his children, even though it made family members uncomfortable. Those kids knew the truth, and he wasn't pulling punches with them. So they dealt with life, and they walked into things knowing the truth. So, that was a big one for me, the belt of truth. But
I
that is, oh, go ahead.
no, 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 sorry. Yeah, I wanted to just just add to it because that not telling youth truth is a big piece, you know. And a blatant lie is very different from sharing truth from a perspective where you give it based on the the level of processing of the person, well, not person but the child, right? So it doesn't mean you're just gonna sit there and share stuff that become very heavy for them and they may not understand. um at the same time, it's not our duty and place to assume that they don't understand, because they will ask follow-up questions. But I do think about how easy um, these lies come when it comes to speaking to children and actually telling them the truth. And the sad story is the lack of truth actually gets us in trouble, right? That lack of truth is what gets you into thinking, oh, well, yeah, it's just a peck. Let me just, do this and nothing's gonna, well, yeah, you fear that, but at the same time, no one sat down to say, your sexuality and your sex is sacred to you. It has a huge value to whomever you're going to meet with. So that's something to hold very dear to you. That is some beautiful truth to learn. And that's some beautiful truth for an adult to even say to a youth. And so, to think of, when I think about how easy some of those lies come. But um in addition to that, I think about the weight when we talk about armor and how heavy it is. You know, it it is heavy because it require, and that heaviness, it may not be a physical weight, but the beauty of the symbolism is in that, just as armor requires you to be a certain physical strength to be able to even stand in it at the beginning, because eventually your muscles gonna get accustomed to it, as Master Milik says, right? But to make that correlation to what it is to actually wear the armor of our Elohim, it means that it is heavy. The heaviness may not be physical, but it requires accountability. It requires that we acknowledge, hey, this is a huge undertaking. I am a representative in a sense. I'm being charged to hold true, right? To be a follower of the way. That's important, right? So it isn't easy because you can't be wishy-washy. You can't, put on the belt of truth today and then tomorrow say, I'm not wearing it because, yeah, it's getting too tight. Or it gives me an opportunity to, you know, I guess, be relaxed in the expectations and some of the values that we have or we hold dear to us. Like who's to say, yes, it's Sabbath and we ought to keep the Sabbath, which means there's certain, but I decide not to. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. Or part of our expectations is not to eat certain foods, but we consume it because it tastes good and we don't want to stop, you know? Um, or we reject having a mate because we think we could do it on our own, right? Or people reject having a mate because they think they could do it on their own. They no longer see the value. Women, of course, is who we're speaking to directly too. You don't see the value in having a man, right? And so there are people who will gaslight you. There are people who will actually give you falsehoods, right? To set your life on and tell you that that's the foundation. Yeah, I'm my own boss. I could do it by myself, right? But that's a big falsehood, right? And I think that's there's a lack of truth. That belt of truth is not being worn by a lot of people right now because we seem to think that we don't need family. We seem to think that we don't need, to be mated as women. We don't need that guidance. We could do it on our own, and that's such a lie. It is not truth. Yeah, they're like different components of the belt. I just wanted to point out, and I know we said we didn't do too much of but I can't help it.
I just wanted to jump in on that because when you were talking about information, and when you give misinformation, it's a lie, and it takes us back to knowledge, because I remember, someone was saying that ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
That's right.
So when we don't seek out the knowledge to know the truth about certain things, that's not I, it's not gonna save us. Oh, I didn't know. you know um it's just, it turns into an excuse like everything else, because we are required to know. If your life has any value to you at all, then you need to know. I was just reading what Chief Yuya is saying in the chat. He says people are taught that children are a punishment for are taught that children are a punishment for having sex. Meanwhile, if you truly felt that as a punishment deep down, you would not have done it. There was a piece of you that wanted a child. And and you're absolutely right. And I believe that was something, it was an opportunity for me to learn from an elder or my mother at that time. As Akoti Murray, as you put it in perspective, that's an opportunity to teach. That's why we shouldn't be lying to our kids, you know, and there's always a way to tell them the truth. And, I'm always listening to how Chief talks about how he introduces his youth and he gets them ready, you know, to learn. And he's always so honest. And what might seem to me to be blunt, because so many things were hidden from me as a child. And that's, like you said, I got in trouble by going out there and trying to figure it out by myself. But you're absolutely right. there was a piece of me that wanted a child. And Chief also says that's why that type of lying opens up portals in a child far too early. I agree. Adult girls and boys don't need mates. Only men and women should have them. Children have overseers, and that is something that, as I've gotten older and I look at, the things I keep going back to the podcast for this strong on reset, because one of the things that stood out is when Chief stated that we're still dealing with. I'm not getting the exact words he said, but it was trauma. It was mistakes that we openly and ignorantly, made out of ignorance. So now, self-inflicted things that we're trying to recover for, and we have to reset. And resetting has a lot to do with, you know, when you know the truth, then it's no longer an excuse about what you didn't know, how you didn't and a lot of times here in the new we realize that when we use the I didn't know, somebody along the way have told you. You just didn't want to know. You didn't listen. You didn't want to know the truth because it was better to do, left you to do what you wanted to do. um so yeah, I understand why truth is the first piece of clothing, because it truth is power, as we learn in the supreme mathematics. That it gives you a lot of power to be able to move into the other garments we're going to talk about. Marjorie Marie, she says, have you ever came into truth and had to go back to your parents or those who may have taught you things that were untrue and had to tell them the truth you found? If so, how did they receive it? Um, I've had to do that. Matter of fact, I remember catching my mom talking on the telephone, and she was not telling the truth. And I was in elementary school. And matter of fact, she got really angry at me because she said something, and I don't think the people on the other end of the phone could hear me. But I looked at her, I said, that's not true. And she gave me a look that could have burnt a hole through me. And I remember when she got off the phone, she said, don't you ever confront me like that in front of other people. And I looked at her and I said, but mom, you told me you don't like liars. Well, sometimes you have to tell a little white lie, you know? And I just remember thinking that little white lies were okay, which goes back to what Chu says, how dangerous it is. And the portal, he says, that type of lying opens up portals in a child, and yeah, you just have to look back and see, you know, where things went wrong in you, because that's where you realize that you have to change regardless of what happened, regardless of who taught you what. We can only hold on to those excuses for so long. Most of us that are adults at this point, making choices for ourselves, we can't blame other people for not being truthful and not being honest, because that old, I remember, I couldn't say it for a long time, but remember that oh what a something where we weave when we set out to deceive,
Mm,
and you think about that spider's web that you get caught up in, you
right.
know and I've been so embarrassed by telling lies and didn't remember the lie I told. And then when I had to go back and I repeated something different, and they said, well, that's not what you said, and it just, right then and there, it lets people know she's a liar. She's not honest, But that is not something we get to just hang on to when we come into a community like a new.
I wanted to respond to Margie Marie's comment and question actually, and I think the question is can be answered by everyone. Like I think we could all jump in the chat and share, you know, if you when you had to do that, is so how did it, like how did they receive it? I'm on here every other Sabbath, and you do not see any of them here. And I think that goes to show that's a good example of how they received it. It's rejected. It's rejected because, you know, my parents, they go to church. They're God-fearing people. That's the phrase that people would use, right? They're God-fearing people. Um, but embracing this is not acceptable. I can tell you now, right now, um, I have a parent who's celebrating what they call a birthday, right? And I can say that because it's around the same time where we have like a festival. It's carnival, carne, flesh, festival of the flesh. Let's just say. But I have shared this culture and shared and identified this truth. Um, and even though this is my choice and I have chosen and I continue to love my blood family, my blood relatives actually, um, it's still scoffed, you know. One of them sent me a picture. They're all out having fun, and I was like, well, enjoy family. That's the most important thing. Enjoy family. And the response was there was laughter. It's almost as if you're laughing at the comment, right? Like, what do you know about family because you're not even here, right? Am I being clear with this story? So you choose truth, and when you choose truth, you're rejected. And sometimes that happens, and it's like, well, wow, aren't you the one saying this? You were the one who actually dragged me to church in the first place, right? And now I'm saying, oh, wow, this is another angle of the same scripture that you have been saying to me that I should explore, right? I went to a Catholic school. The Helios Biblios was the foundation of what they used. And even if I'm saying, no, here's another perspective, here's another layer. This is deeper. We were reading this in English, it's Hebrew. If I don't know it to say, okay, I'm teaching it, but we do a lot of breakdowns here, and Chief does do a lot of breakdowns and covers a lot. Um, I've shared all of that, and it has been rejected. I literally had what is it called, like a little, not little, but it was a, oh my goodness, what do you call those? It's like we're reading a book together. Oh my gosh, it went out of my head. We had a little group, and we were reading text together, and the idea was to extend it and continue to read additional text. Well, it ended, and most people were not happy with what was being shared in the text. They didn't even share the book with anybody else ever in their life because they weren't in agreement with what was there, even though it was sharing truth. This book was mine, not words. So I guess I'm sharing that to say they did not receive it at all, right? To the point where you're separate from us because we're going to continue to live the culture that we were given and handed down to us, even though what we're celebrating as culture is actually spoken against in the same scripture that you read on a Yom Rishon. That's how deep it is. Um, this is family. Anu is my family. That's the truth. Um, and everything else will just keep happening. People will do what they want, but that's part of the truth. Part of the truth is identifying, yeah, there's blood family and there's a spiritual family, right? Part of identifying and understanding who I am and what governs me is that truth. I think some of that is discussed in the 100th episode. Like really examining the self, really examining yourself. Some of the activities that she shared with us so that we could pay attention to what's happening to our bodies and what's going on and how we respond to things. Like that's truth too, right? That's truth too. And later on, when we talk about spirit, we talk about, just paying attention to emotions and how they trigger different things in the body, and the fact that they can use them as a compass, you know? So my emotions at that point was, wow, you laugh at the fact that I'm even regarding you as family and saying family is important. Um, and you laugh at the fact that I choose truth over what I think is not truth, you know? So yeah, there's a lot there. But yeah, in some cases you will be excommunicated, you know? It,
Chief, he gave me the right wordings of what I just quoted a few minutes ago. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when
mm,
we seek to deceive. And that's a big part of truth, is people being deceitful, and even like as you're sharing about your parents, um, I remember what you made me think about was when um, I remember Chief addressed it on one of the podcasts when people talk about my truth, their truth, because what you were speaking about is when people they choose, to celebrate and follow religions that was given to them by another culture, and it's not their truth, but they adopt it as their truth, and there's the truth. There's not 10 separate truths, except, we do talk about how Chief talks about we don't all serve the same master,
we don't.
you know. So their truth maybe is, well, it's not maybe, it is different from the truth of the Most High Yah. So yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because that's, and it's when it's coming from family, that's why it's so important to have a community and that knows the culture, and we are family. And that has made my transition. I mean, yeah, I love my blood relatives and family, but not to the point. What does it say in the scripture about you have to be willing to leave? Yeshua at one point said, "Let the dead bury the dead," and you do have to be willing to leave mother, father, sister, brother. Even your own children.
Mm,
If it comes to that, because that's just how committed you have to be, and putting on that armor is part of that commitment.
it is. It is.
It's a lot going on in the chat.
There is. Eva Sequoia answered the question. She says, to answer your phone, Marjorie Marie, yes, I have been in that situation with my parents. They began to defend their stance and teach what they thought was true. Hmm. Ima Yakira Eden shares, she says, great question, Margie Marie Art. Yes, a part of being Anu is the beautiful gift of truth, which means the other side was a lie. Right. I mean, yeah, what you just said there, imagine 4th of July. Right? Right? Be- because I'm going to pause right in the middle of what you just said. You may you're reading. I can't even finish reading it yet because you know what I was told? I was told, well, I never taught you that. That is not the culture I taught you. That those words were said to me by a parent, and I'm sharing it here. I feel no way, no how about sharing it. And I paused and I said, yeah, that's true, because my culture is different from yours. My culture is different from yours. So I will hold steadfast to whatever that you seem to think is the other culture, which is the actual truth, and I will let go of the lie, you know, let go of the lie. Because, yeah, I can't hold on to that chain if I'm holding on to a lie. I can't. I want to hold on to that chain. Um, so she says, she says, but my blood relatives are not open to that and therefore choose the lie, right? Like Chief says, Lazala, mine heart words is my weakest tea for those who can't take hotter truth. Yeah, they were stuck on masculine and feminine. Well, listen, if, let the dead bury the dead. That's in the past. And I wanted, when you said that, well, let the dead bury the dead, I paused and I thought about people who take the Nazareth vow, you know? Let's talk about truth. Like, the let's talk about the belt of truth. You take a vow that requires you to stay away from the dead. So even in experiences, and this is where let the dead bury the dead is so significant too. Like even if you have lost someone, yes, you could go to the funeral, you could go to bury them, but you would have to actually cut your covenant. You have to cut your locks, right? That's deep truth. You have to be if you want to break the covenant, you have to be willing to shave your head. And that shaving of the head is significant of breaking the covenant. And most people call it like come again, where you have to start over again. There's a whole process. But when you said it, it made me think of that, because I thought that was such a profound example of the truth. There is a standard and a law, and these are the things that are expected. And when you lose loved ones, you have to make a choice. But the choice will force, if you make the choice to go, it will force you to break the covenant. Like that. It's love Allah's wisdom, right? And if it's not that law, then the other thing that you're choosing is a lie, right? So it's a truth or a lie. That's it. You know, she says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Indeed. Thank you. I'm going to put that on the screen. Thank you very much, Alpha Woman Now. That is a reference to Matthew 16:24. She says, no, actually, Luke 14:26 and Matthew is the precept. I see. I see. Thank you. Margie Marie says, yeah, it's good. Toda Rabba for that. Okay. Miss Margie with your Hebrew. All right. Very good. It's good to hear everyone's stories. It's always a reminder that your process isn't unfamiliar to others. Others have experienced it also. Yes. Yes. Uh, you're leaving? Where are you leaving? Ima Sequoia says, I see women have families having that divine protection against blood relatives. They must. They must. They must.
You know, as I'm listening, the first thing what just came to my mind is I thought about um, Abraham. He had to leave his family. He left his father, his father, and traveled and went away before he received the promise. But he just filled my mind, because right away that tells you something. He left the whole land and went to a whole nother country, you know, but he had to leave his father's house. And
Right.
when I think about it, I believe his father, and I was trying to think of his name. I know it started with a T, but I can't remember his father's name. But I remember his father I worship idols. So as I'm listening to everyone else talk about our family, even when I think about my family, when I went to bury my sister, I was fortunate enough to having a new sister go with me,
Mm-hmm.
and that made all the difference in the world. Like you said, you can go to the funeral, but I didn't partake in the things they partook of. I went to, you know, just say goodbye to my sister, and that was that, and return back to home. And it was totally different from anything I would ever done with my family. And again, even when they watched our fellowship build, I've got a sister who like, what are y'all talking about? And I don't get it. And I don't, and I'm like, here's the information. You can go research it, but this is my life, you know. And you always compliment the changes that have been made, but you
Right.
don't give credit to why those changes were made. They saw me run through churches, you know what I'm saying, and even commit to being there, even commit to tithing and offerings, but never had anything had the impact. And again, I wasn't committed to that because I wasn't totally, you know, we know. He's the shepherd says, my sheep hear my voice.
Right.
And when you're being presented with truth, especially when you've looked at and tried so many other things. But it was different coming into the truth because I knew I had to commit to it or either just live a lie. And that was a truth.
Right.
Commit to the real truth or just choose to go ahead and live that lie. But yeah.
It makes me think of so when I lived in Cuba, I will never forget this phrase: "Patria or muerte." Be a patriot or die. That's it. Be a patriot or die. So follow truth, or you know, yeah. So I'm a shift. I won't finish it. You finish it, but Yafe did respond. Maji Marie, she says some said I was in a cult, which is great because cult is culture, So that's a good thing, right? Margie Marie, but I also realized that I was wrong in trying to drag people along. True. This is true because I don't know who they serve. Like I don't know what voice that their ears are tuned to listen to. Because if my sheep hear my voice is indeed true, then yeah, they're probably different voices and different sheepses. Sheep. I'm joking. Let me stop being silly. So I think that's important. Massa Menelik says, "Man, they didn't even give me a wooden sword." Whoa. All right. All right. Well, hey, sometimes there are more things more powerful than wooden swords, especially when you have the sword of the spirit. You don't need a wooden sword. You got the sword of the spirit. Paul was really dropping some gems indeed. Really, really, really. And not gems, but instruction. Like he's giving them practical things to do, and practical to the point where he is, making he's taking the idea of truth and correlating it to wearing a belt, right? And I just thought that those were significance, right? We talked a little bit about the Roman armor and all of that, and the idea of it being protection, but I really think it's important to think about how he's connecting those pieces of actual wear. That's significant. It's practical too. You can apply it immediately. Ima Yakira Eden says, in that example of coming again reflects not only the commitment but one's accountability. That's right. One can't sneak in the back door of the funeral, for Yah is there also holding the standard. Very true. Very true. Very true. And if you don't cut, your locks gonna drop off. So moving on nicely. Um so somebody said, I don't know, yeah, they said something else. Margie Marie says, chief comment makes me think of Luke 8:21. My mother and brothers are those who hear God's word and put it into practice. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That what you say there reminds me, Margie Marie, of what she says, like you can, get new ones. You can get a new mother, you can get a new brother, you can get a new sister, you can get a new, get a new one. He also says you can get a new wife too. So hey, if it's not doing what it needs to do something else. Um, I really think that's both. I'll pause. I see you unmuting. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, who say you can't choose your family? you know, who says you can't?
Hmm. She says you have to also consider. You have to also consider the source. We may be related to them, but is their perspective coming from research, intellect, and divine wisdom, or social programming by their slave masters, whom they love? Yeah, it's right. That's it's true. In many cases, it's the social programming, right? Yafe says, I think that is Abraham's father's name, Terah. Oh, okay, thank you. If you could get a new mind, then yeah, a new family is possible too. Hey, yes, renew the mind. I don't know if you could renew the family. That might be a struggle, uphill struggle, you know. So get a new one. Master Menelik says the placement of that wooden sword comment was kind of out of context, wasn't referring to family culture. Okay, okay, I think. Okay. I don't think I understand, but all right. Um, he does say, but in some aspects, there was not cultivation of certain principles. So in that case, the wooden sword analogy still applies. Okay, thank you. You can get a new everything except teeth. Well, I know some people who do, yeah, do. No, I'm not gonna do that. Stop it, Maria. Don't say it. Because I was gonna say something else. I'm not gonna say it. It's not the place or the time. Control yourself. Um, yeah. So you know what? We've been talking about, and you shared your stories after. Sorry, I have this. Apparently there's this levitating stand that I have, so it's just shaking a lot. So I apologize if
Oh,
any.
oh no, actually, I did share the story on Truth.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank. So Ima Sequoia says we attract a new spiritual family when we take on a new way of life. Yes, yes, indeed, indeed. Because I think about the frequency and the energy that we're emitting when we're moving in truth, when we're walking with that breastplate, right? When others can see us and they're like, wow, it's like you're vibrating on that same frequency, right? You're functioning the same way. It's not just, oh, wow, you've wrapped your hair and you're wearing a dress like me. It goes beyond that, right? They listen to speech, they listen to, the things that you say, what you hold sacred to you, and they're like, oh, wow, other people can see that. And then they become drawn to that, right? So we do attract our spiritual family, and if we're indeed following a culture, then the others who are following that culture, you know they're drawn to it. We're drawn to that same culture. Margie Marie says that's true. New brain cells change up genetics, but the teeth, well, you've better work with what you got. Oh my gosh, y'all just being bad about teeth there in the chat. So the next part of the armor is what we call the breastplate of righteousness. So let's go back to Ephesians again, right? We're going to touch base and get ready because we're going to ask you to now tell us a story, right? So get ready for your story about righteousness. I'm just putting a little pin in there for you to start thinking, start thinking about what that story is that you could share, because Safta shared her story. In verse 11 in that Ephesians 16:10-19, well, we're making reference to 10-19, but we're only reading that 10-17 piece, right? It's speaking, the verse is speaking about the devil. The verse is speaking about what is goes against what is our culture, right? And so putting on the breastplate of righteousness, I think about the fact that every day we have devils inside of us trying to pull us away from our divinity, right? One of the most profound episodes in the Jezebel series, Chief begins to break down serious verses that we need to arm ourselves with, because it's like it gives us an opportunity to remember you are divine. This is what you're working with, actually, not what that is saying, right? Not that energy, but this is what you're actually working with. Those are really powerful. I'm actually trying to move through one, trying to find one right now, because I'm like, I wanted to pull one, but I'm gonna continue working with the breastplate of righteousness. So when you have thoughts that are not, when we have thoughts that are not divine, we have to cut it off, right? Because it doesn't allow us to really live in that space where we could say, oh, this is who I am, right? I actually have a soul. I am a follower of the way. I'm a child of the Most High, Elohim, of Yah, right? We have to slay that. We have to cut ourselves off from that. We have to protect ourselves from that. And so the way we do that is to put on that breastplate of what is right, right? Right thinking, right thoughts. That's important. And we have to have the words of the Most High. So we have to study, and we have to have those words on our lips so we could actually say them. And it's not even about empowerment. It's not even about empowerment. It's knowing, hey, I could lean on this because it's truth. You know, the thoughts that we have are not mental, but it's our history and our ego, right? So, and this is connected. This is connected because when we don't clear out those thoughts, they take over. They take over our life, and you got to clear out those thoughts and pour in wisdom. Let's just say that, right? Today's 1-1, knowledge, all being born to wisdom. You got to pour in wisdom, and that wisdom is the word of the Most High. That's important. So we have to stand, and we have to gird our loins with truth, and we have to have the breastplate of righteousness. So when I think about breastplate, or when you think about a breastplate, can you just quickly share in the chat, when you think about breastplate, what is one word that comes to mind immediately? What is one word that comes to mind when you think about breastplate?
You know, that breastplate of righteousness. When you were speaking, I was thinking about these evangelists and these preachers that's on TV or just in churches in general. And you know, as much as I used to be on that scene, some of those very same pastors and preachers and evangelists that used to speak against something that's now in our face, that is so unrighteous, and it has nothing to do with truth, and that is people deciding what gender they want to be.
Mm.
And it's like taboo to speak truth into that situation. It's taboo to speak of righteousness. And I believe it's in Deuteronomy where the Most High Yah breaks it down what is an abomination to him. He gives us clear instructions about not laying with, a man not laying with his mother or sister or beasts or animals or even those of the same sex. But it has become taboo. And this is why that blessed breastplate of righteousness is so important, because you can't be swayed by society. You can't be swayed. It's not, again, it's not your truth. Well, my truth is I want to be referred to as this, but you're not that. You know, and it's like it's a lie in our face that we. It's like choking. If you live in if you don't live your culture and you're dealing with society, even now it's about having a job. Some people are confronted, regardless of what righteous is righteous and what's true. They're now being told they have to accept this lie. So having that breastplate of righteousness, and it's a breastplate. So not only does it protect the heart and the vital organs, you know what I mean, but it's almost like you're challenged that if you put this piece of a wardrobe on. And again, you were talking a moment ago about the devil, and we were talking about that, to be able to withstand the wiles of the devil. And people, what they are accepting, and we're talking about so-called God-fearing Christian people who now says they've changed their whole perspective. The Most High Yah has not changed. He has not changed what is an abomination to him. He has not changed what is sin to him. But society changes daily. And now with the internet, it changes hourly, and down to the minute. Which was right before is now wrong. What was wrong is now right. But that breastplate of righteousness, when we think about a breastplate in the armor, that was one of the heaviest pieces of the armor. And it was mostly made of steel. And I think Aki El Karar mentioned that Kevlar that, they had to wear up under it. Um, but when I picture that, I think of that being one of the most heaviest and awkward pieces to
Right.
wear, because it's protecting all those vital organs. But yeah, you just really made me think about that when you were talking about you know putting
Mhm.
that on, and that is one of the most important pieces, because righteous is righteous. And yeah, we're being challenged at this point, uh, actually condemned for staying true to the righteousness of the Most High Yah.
We're being condemned, you say?
I said we're be at first I said we were being challenged, and then I said no, we're even being condemned.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you're a homophobic or a hater, or people choose to do what they want to do. But I always felt like, yeah, you have the freedom to be what you want to be, but don't step on my freedom by trying to force it on me.
Right.
That's when it's not freedom. Because if what it takes for you to be free means I can't be free in my truth or the truth and righteousness, now it's becoming something totally different. And I like what's going on in the chat, so I'll just let you go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Um, you're on mute? Okay. So we have we have a good bit of responses. We have organs, we have heart, we have shielding, we have center. Hey, you know, if the engine break down, what happened? you know, if the organ shut down, what happened? If the heart stops pumping blood, what happens? You know? Ima Yakira Eden, Alpha Manal says armor, and Ima Sequoia says courage. Courage. Interesting. So Maji Murray says one of the 12 jewels, clothing, the proper protection from the devil's civilization. That protection is knowledge of self and the culture. Hmm, interesting. Can you explain that a little bit more, please, Margie Murray? Art? Yes, 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 please indeed. Um, so that's gonna go. That's it. I don't think we have anyone else. All right. So thank you all for sharing, what comes to mind, or that one thing that you think of when you think of breastplate. And we know that you said something about it being, well, I think when you were explaining, I thought of like a sheet being forged to form and fit one properly. But and we talk about it being heavy, but I also think in some armies they were made to wear a chain link type vest underneath, right? I've seen some with just the vest on top of the clothing, but I've seen some of that too, like where there's a vest underneath. And correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. So it makes it even heavier. But the idea is that there's a core. There's a core to make that vessel function. And the core or center um, needs protection. It needs shielding, right? Because the major organs are what help us to function, right? Heart, lungs, blood, air, major for survival, right? Well, so this is beautiful because we see here this is the correlation that we can say is being made. Paul is literally saying, listen, righteousness is required in order for you to survive. If you want to keep the core part of your vessel moving, that's the engine, keep it running. The engine for this armor is righteousness. And so our Anu glossary gives us righteousness as the act of being functionally relevant within a current perceptual context, especially within one's community. So a current perceptual context, that context is ties to culture. So your context or your culture is driving how you function, is driving how your purpose driven, and you're driven based on that purpose that's tied to how you should live, what you should do. And that's what is righteous. Righteous makes compels us to do what is right. And it's also the infilling with the spirit and the living of spiritual truth. So this I wouldn't say it's an idea. This functionality of followers of the way are people who identify as Hebrew and following their Elohim and following Yah. This is how you function and move, right? When you're functioning as a righteous person, you're filled with spirit. You're leaning toward what is right all the time. And what is right is contextual, is based on the culture that you're living, is based on the Elohim that you're serving. Like that's important. And so we have to know who's our Elohim, who are we mated to. Like all of those things are really important in order to live righteously, because then you'll be functioning unrighteously if you have a set of laws, you identify as one thing, but you don't know what those laws are, and you're not functioning within that capacity, So I just think the breastplate is a big part of the dialogue when we talk about this divine wardrobe that we're wearing. We're wearing a belt, and they start at a belt. They start at the loins. What is the loins? What's the loins do then? The loins is how we regenerate. That's how we create more followers of the way, more children. The loins. That's the first place. The belt of truth. What else? That's the most important part. And then what? Then the next portion is, yeah, safeguard your core, because that's how the engine keep running. This core, your core is righteous. I think, yeah, Paul was a genius, but he was filled with the Spirit of the Most High. I think we said that after much deliberation. After much deliberation, we understand that that is true. So he knew, and he was writing from prison at that time, right? So he's writing to the people, actually saying, listen, I am locked away. Y'all didn't have nothing else to save you but the Most High himself. Do these things, right? And do them now. So yeah, just when I think about that breast, I can keep going on. I'm just gonna stop because I know I'm in a flow, but I don't want to just keep talking because that's not right for a woman to do. So I'm just gonna pause.
You know, Chief says, and that perception is the perception of the originator of all. So righteousness is the act of being pleasing to the creator of all worlds. Our own righteousness is tarnished armor full of holes. Come on now. I was reading, I think that was some of Chiefs that it referred, which is what I was reading earlier. It says, the belt of truth that we use to surround ourselves with, so that while in the midst of the battle, we can see accurately. Isn't that something? So there's a reason why, we were talking about the order, and even when we were studying together earlier, Akoti Morea, about the order of the clothing of the wardrobe, that spiritual wardrobe, putting on that full armor, and why it's put on the way it is. Nothing is by happenstance. It's not a mistake that he starts with that belt of truth, and I didn't even see it that way. But of course, Chief always brings that thing that we don't see, that belt of truth we use to surround ourselves with, so while in the midst of the battle, we can see accurately, you know, and in a new women, we're not a part of. I mean, we are all in a new Asafo warriors, and especially when it comes to spiritual warfare, and so this really stands out to me. Chief also says, also knowing the truth will eventually make us free. The belt shows us how to see the lies of the enemy and not to be a slave to them. Oh, yes. And their lies dealing with that devil, you know, um, that's ever present. And you started speaking on that when you were talking about the Jezebel, because, when I started really learning and researching about Jezebel and really being on guard, which means I was on guard against myself, because she had become such a part of me that I didn't even know when she was taking the lead. It was just so, like she jump out in front of me, like, hold up, hold up, hold up. No, that's the Jezebel, that's the Jezebel spirit, And when Chief talked about it being a spirit, a possession, even, there's that truth that allows us to see the lies that we tell ourselves, especially, and that's what really began to make me abhor lying, and realizing it had become such a part of my nature. I mean, it was a natural thing for me. It flowed like, you know, I was believing my own lies. But when you know the truth, it allows you to see the lie and to see even where it resonates from
Right.
and how it becomes. I was given a chore, and I won't forget this coming into a new um, I was given some instruction by Chief when I first came in. about, one of the things he said, and I can share this now. He said, "You're going to have to go back and confront that little 7-year-old girl." And I was stuck. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. But I didn't want to actually confess to him for a couple of months. I think it took me like a month to say, well, how do I confess? How do
Right.
I confront that little girl?
Mm-hmm.
And all this time, and I'm going on 3 years now, I'm still confronting that 7-year-old little girl. I'm still getting to know her, and I'm still because there was a lost innocence at 7.
Yeah.
Because I remember being a happy, um, I was undefiled child. And there was creativity there was imagination there was there was that it's innocence. But soon as that is taken away, all other things start coming into play. And I believe at that point Jezebel will, began to come in, even at that young age, because
Right.
from then on, other things started happening. But yeah, I really can appreciate. I didn't see it that way about how that belt shows us how to see the lies of the enemy and
Mm,
not be a slave to them. Because, sometimes we choose to believe the lies. We want to believe the lies. But when you realize that that is a destruction, that there's a purpose, those lies are planted there in your mind, to keep you from your purpose, to keep you from actualization, self actualization,
yeah.
to keep you from fulfilling the mission that you came to this planet to fulfill, you know, then you start it becomes different. It's just so different. But yeah, this is really
That
good.
that thank you, because directly connected to that, surrounding yourself with the belt, right? Putting on that belt of truth so you can see
Hmm.
accurately, right? So you can see the lies from see me.
Hmm.
Precept Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest out of the womb, I sanctified thee. And I ordained thee as a prophet unto the nations. Like, talk about prepping yourself for battle for real. Like, talk about putting on so you can see the truth. That's speaking to the truth of who we are, who you are. When you say, "Yeah, I'm putting on the armor," that's what you're doing, right? And when you see the truth, the words help you to see the truth. The words of the Most High help us to see the truth. When we're in battle. Um, and these are from Chief, so it's not like, I'm whipping it out because I'm like, woo, I'm like, yeah, I try to study hard. I try. Um, but yeah, Chief has the sacred text references in his, like in the chamber. He has them constantly pulling them out. 1 Peter 2 and 9. But ye are chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and a holy nation, a peculiar people. They're peculiar people. Yeah, so people gonna be like, stay over there, cause yeah, that's all right. Thank you. I'll stay over here. Yes. That ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of the darkness into his light. Talk about going into battle with truth, being able to see clearly, you know. So thank you again, Chief, for always bringing it, as Sapta has said, that layer, peeling back, how we normally see things and how we'll talk about it, and pushing us to the next level, taking away that superficial and going next level. Thank you. Um, so for those of you who are listening, um, and leaning toward that belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness, yeah, tune in to Chief Yuya's podcast, right? And listen to that Jezebel series, listen to that episode. It really gives a list. I think that's episode part 7. All right, that's part 7. Gives a list, and that list is it's more than encouraging. It helps with that truth factor. I'm gonna jump to the chat. Um, wait. He says, I remember I remember in the segment on a woman of understand. Oh, I read that part. And she's laughing. He says, y'all really do think I can't sense your confusion when I say things. All the heads nod and I understands and are see through. Every word I tell you is the instructions. Is the instructions tacitly. Okay. All right. Instructions taken. Instructions taken. Um, we wanted, yes, yeah, that question was answered. We are from heaven. All right, so I think we're going to shift a little bit, and the reason we're going to shift is because when we were talking about how to present the build, we were thinking we want to include stories, right? But we didn't want to be the only one sharing stories. So we want to charge you all, before we close this evening, we want to charge you to do this one thing, right? In the chat, just place one of your stories, one of the stories that you've had where you've had to, imagine yourself putting on a breastplate of righteousness. Because yes, you're in battle, right? And having to choose righteousness and doing so willingly, or maybe not choosing righteousness and suffering the consequences, um, and then having to, you know, hold yourself accountable for that choice, right? Not choosing righteousness. So we wanted you all to share similar. I think I'm missing something. Similarly to Safta Haba's share earlier, I know she shared a story. We wanted you all to share something in the chat that, you know, is directly connected to you having to make the choice, choosing righteousness, and what that brought to you. And if you haven't, if you have had an opportunity where you had to choose righteousness and you chose not to, function as a righteous being or function from a place of righteousness, what were the consequences? All right. I think I'm missing some things because I see some items in the chat, but I feel like I'm missing some. Uh, so let me go back. Oh no, I'm way behind. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm way behind. I was looking at something else. I was like, am I missing something? So we're gonna pause a little bit, like, share, subscribe. Those of you who are tuned in, listening, and not necessarily engaging in the chat, we want to encourage you to jump into the chat, come in and share, maybe ask a question appropriately based on the topic that we're sharing on. But before we're getting ready to close and seal off this part 1 of you know, our divine wardrobe, but we're going to close with some of your stories about choosing righteousness and or not choosing righteousness and the consequences of it. All right. So, want to get after?
Yeah, I was just wanting to go back a little bit because I was going back to one of Chief's when he set up a little up higher that y'all really don't think I can sense your confusion when I say things. All the head nods and I understands are see-through. Every word I tell you is instruction. So and the reason I wanted to just kind of go back to that is because, I'll have to be the first to admit, uh, we were talking about the podcast, which is so powerful. And I have to usually listen to the podcast 3 or 4 times. And about that third time, it starts making a lot of sense to me and speaking to certain areas that really connect. But what happens for me sometimes, and this is just because I don't think I'm the only one, is a lot of times Chief, the way he that we learn so much from him, and it's always in layers. And I think when I hear something the first time, um, I outthink it. I try to think too much into it instead of just listening to what's being said and taking it what it's being for what's being said. I'm always trying to say, okay, I know it's deeper than that. I know he's saying something else, but at first you got to really hear. And so when I was reading that, I was thinking, um, am I just nodding my head thinking I understand? And am I missing it? Is it going over my head? Because eventually I get it, but I don't always get it the first time. And I think I'm nodding. Well, I can only speak for myself because I'm hearing it, but it is a lot more to it. Um, So I was just trying to see what I missed, actually, because I thought I missed something there. Because we were just talking about, that belt that shows us how we see through the lies of the enemy and not be a slave to them, And I remember earlier he spoke about mind, heart, words, and for me I'm still challenged with Mind Heart Words because there's so much and there's so many layers to it. So is all his work, but it causes us to study. It causes us to go back, and you have to be repetitive because, unless you've done all the research and studying and put in all the time he did, you're not going to get it the first time around. Not in completion. Um, Chief also says, I thought this was part two. Um, She says no one gets anything the first time. They hear it. Understanding requires repeated application. Okay. A variety of angles and implementation. It takes multiple passes. Okay. Then I don't feel like the Lone Ranger because I know, even with this last podcast, actually, the whole series in part one and part two, part two has been some real personal stuff from starting with Jezebel all the way up to resetting. It's like I'm every day. I wake up listening to it. I go to bed listening to it, and
Yeah,
there's it marinates. But once you do that, I mean, it's so valuable. It becomes a piece of. You just start recognizing things that have always been present, but you never took the time to take a look at it,
right.
or where it comes from. But I
For
wanted
me,
to step.
oh no, I was just gonna say for me, I sometimes it's not there. Sometimes I don't see it. Like, you know, and being able to go back, like she's just saying, it takes multiple passes. So there are some episodes I re-listen to so many times. We're like, and sometimes it's either you're studying or it's playing because it infuses the energy of the space. So I let the episodes play. And I'm working and I'm listening, or I'm studying and I'm listening and writing notes and checking references. And um I think it was the one on Proverbs where he was making the distinction between woman versus wife. Like he's saying, yeah, Proverbs is talking about wife, not woman. I put down every single thing I had in my hand. I looked at the screen, I looked at the speaker, I looked at the mic. I was like, where was I when this was said before? Because I didn't hear it at all. But it was playing over and over because it was so profound. And I went back, I checked references, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like it is literally there, so it does take those passes. And yes, it's true, sometimes there's the will that the understanding will come. But it doesn't just come, and we don't just get filled with it. It's the applying it. It's applying it. What good is a breastplate of righteousness if I could just repeat the words as opposed to actually putting it on, actually doing right and making sure that what I do is pleasing to the Most High. And that's important. And this is based on what Chief has shared. So I'm not saying I came up with this like right on the spot. You know, you know.
So Chief did say, he said, I thought this was part two. Well, part one, A and B, I guess, was basically about the physical wardrobe. And this is now a discussion about the spiritual wardrobe, which is so much more needed, and actually affects, once I've learned that as we're studying about the breastplate, because I've heard it over and over again, about, the belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness, and the gospel of peace. But to really break that down, and especially having more knowledge at this point about the meaning, because again, I was taught this, I was given this information from another culture, not my culture, not my community. So it takes on a whole new meaning. And we just thought it was so important that after we discussed uh, the physical wardrobe, that we get right down to the nitty gritty about what is even more important than what you put on your body is your spiritual wardrobe. And that's that armor that we can't survive without, And I'm learning that even in a new, because everything I've learned, matter of fact, it's really funny. I went back and started reading the 14 keys over again, because when I came in orientation, that went right over my head. And I was like,
Yeah,
should I tell anybody that I don't get it, that I don't understand it? Am I going to look dumb? And we broke it down and we read it. But again, that's when it's just on you, not in you. And now when I read the 14 keys, I get a whole different, vision and a whole different understanding of what's being said. And like he says, it takes multiple passes. So I'm thankful for that. So I'll just settle down and keep going over and over, however many passes it takes for me. I want to get it.
So Chief's answered the question, and I think it's just Chief and Jason who actually answered our question, which is, tell us a story about a time when you had to actually choose righteousness, or a time when you selected or elected not to choose righteousness and you suffered the consequences. She says, restraining myself from causing physical harm to someone who was doing everything in their wicked, demonic little mind to provoke me to it. I chose to stay in my temple and still do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and still do. Hey, that makes me think of, hey, but ye are chosen. Ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. We start aligning with what they do. And this goes back to some of what it makes me think of. um, Aki El Karar's presentation last night, and a piece,
Yes.
an excerpt from Neely Fuller Jr., who was, saying like, yeah, people don't go low, you don't gotta go low. Like what they do is what they do, but this is what I do. This is what I do. That's a beautiful example of a time when you had to choose righteousness and you did so. And I thank you for sharing that, because yeah, there we will be tormented. We will be, ignored. We will be brushed aside in many ways by those in the earthly realm. But the most important thing is recognition from the Most High,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
And from the Most High, knowing that the Most High is pleased, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart
It's
be
acceptable.
acceptable in the sight of the Most High.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
time, every time. And they could keep doing what they're doing over there in sorry, someone to say something.
Mhm.
Yes, so and to add on to what you said, we are going to have a part two to this piece, because we have not broken down all the other components of the I keep saying the breastplate, of the armor of the Elohim. So we only covered two parts, but in the next part of this two-part series, which is again on the divine wardrobe, we're going to cover all the other components, and we're going to have a great time doing so and building on it, as we did this evening. Jason, I'm just going to go through Jason. Jason says, when I see people going out, drinking, smoking, choosing not to go, is tough, because I still have the desire at times to numb out a little. hmm Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. That's all I'm gonna read. To everybody's story, you getting one. You getting one. Just share your story. You getting one. You getting one. Oh my goodness. Um, you heard that distinction, Margie Marie. Wonderful. That's great. That's great, because you know there's so many. There's so many. Um, Ima Sequoia answered. Thank you, Ima Sequoia. Thank you, Chief Yuya. Thank you, Jason. Brother Jason. Ima Sequoia says, when I choose to speak against racism in a class where I was the only brown girl in the room, moving in courage and speaking out ended up impacting the class. Yeah, self advocacy, you know. Um, yeah, speaking out. And your example reminds me of one of the recent posts that Chief shared on his Chief Yuya Instagram, right? It was a post of a young man sitting in a what seems like a town hall meeting. I can't remember all the details, but it seems like a town hall meeting or some sort of gathering where we have um, Caucasian people who seem to identify as uh, J-ish, and they were talking about the Holocaust and funding and money and grants and things like that. Well, money most more so, and like he was stating truths constantly and speaking to the quantity of money that has been shared with that nation of people. Um, uh, Based on the Holocaust, and your story just reminds me of that, because it took courage for him to do that. Like, he was sitting in battle and was wearing the belt of truth, literally, and had to choose to speak up and say the truth. He couldn't sit there and just listen to lies. So as I read what you're saying, I thought of that. I thought of that. Aki Darian says, when I was in college, I ended up damaging another student's car. No one was around, and I had one of those angels, devil on your shoulders moments. And thankfully, I chose righteousness, and nothing came of the situation. I give thanks for that still to this day. Oh, well, somebody paid for the damage, though. Oh my goodness, somebody paid for that damage. Aki. Chief says that's why I played the Steely Dan a cappella for you all. That came out in 1977, and I'm still trying to figure out those harmony blends. You have mentioned this before, I remember. And I went looking for it and was not successful. So, and I'm not a musician, so I don't think I'd be able to do it. She says beautiful things take on newer understandings as we grow. This is so true. Beautiful things take on new understandings. This is so true about wow, everything. Um and we have a few left, and we're going to read those, and we're going to bid you all adieu. Master Menelek gave us an answer. He says choosing to assist someone who was being disagreeable. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I read disagreeable, and all I can remember is when I was younger, the adults around me would say, "You're disagreeable. You're disagreeable." They were. It was. I don't know why they said it that way, but that's what came to me when I lived in the Caribbean. That's what they said. They did not say disagreeable. I became a teenager and found out the word was disagreeable. Okay, let me just say that. Because yeah, disagreeable child. Disagreeable. Choosing to assist someone who was being disagreeable during a group project. It was for the good of the overall project, and I learned that the person was disagreeable out of insecurity. Ah, story come to bus. The truth comes forward. All right. Master Menelik also says they didn't understand what they were supposed to do and changed their tune when they realized they weren't going to be ridiculed for being unsure, but they would be shut down for being ignorant. Right? There's a difference. There's a difference. And Ra Haynes, greetings, peace, welcome, Ra Haynes. Um, I had a situation where someone did all she could to slander me, and I didn't react. After a year passed, the same person called me to apologize. All right now. All right now. All right now. Yes. Choosing making our actions align with the will of the Most High, right? Making sure that the Most High is pleased with the things that we choose to do, right? This is what Chief outlined above. That is righteousness, you know. So thank you all for sharing your stories, um, beautiful stories about the importance of putting on that breastplate of righteousness and making sure that we select and choose. Why are you laughing, Master Buddy? Like, what you laughing at? What is funny? What's funny? I don't even.
Probably that being disagreeable.
Disagreeable. Oh gosh, child. Oh gosh. They weren't saying that about me, okay? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about me. It was my cousin. One of them. But thank you all. Thank you all for tuning into this part of our divine wardrobe. Next on the 28th, we will we'll seal it off with part two and dig into the other parts of the wardrobe. We're going to talk about, feet covered in, what again? Oh gosh, I remember. I'm so ashamed.
Feet shrouded with the gospel of peace.
Gospel of peace. Thank you very
Gospel
much.
of peace.
What is
Yes.
thing? We're going to talk about the
Yes.
gospel of peace. We're going to talk about faith. We're going to talk about the sword of the spirit, right?
Mhm.
So see you all on the 28th, right? We're gonna have that ready for you all. If there are no questions or any last words before we go, we're gonna close off this evening's build. We appreciate you all sharing with us, building with us, being in this space. Like, share, subscribe, share this with anyone who you know can learn from this experience where we share and we build and fellowship in the evenings. For those of y'all who are resting already,
Mhm.
rest well.
That's right. That's right.
Rest well.
Yeah.
Peace, everyone, and thank you again to our chief guest.
Peace.
Thank you
Look
again.
forward to being with you all again.
Mm-hmm. Shabbat shalom. All right, all right, all right. We are.